that the concept and the definition of a eulogy,
Yeah.
it always had this sort of, when I was growing up, it always had this kind of connotation with death. The eulogy is, by definition, its literal definition and its function is a celebration of life.
Oh,
When I learned that,
never thought of that way.
I mean, it is the EU part of eulogy, maybe it's EUL, whatever, is connected with the word life, the root word of life, not about death. It is the honoring of the life.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when I learned that the Vedic approach is so important is that whenever anyone or anything that was dear to us goes, it is very important. It is acknowledged that we will have grief, mourning and all that. Of course, it's natural, but it is very important to their transition that we don't dwell in that. It's very that we put our attention on the beauty of their lives, the positive, even when their lives. I'm not talking about our animals, but in being people, even when their lives were not all that great. There was something special about that individual.
Yeah.
That's what you put your attention on. You know?
Do you think we can not to grieve so much? We can try not to grieve so much when it happens?
To me, the trick on that is
Is there a way that we can think, he was suffering, it was better, it's better for him, he's done his time, he's 20, he's more than 20 years old.
to me, it's not so much an analysis of that. It's more about where we choose to put our
Attention.
attention.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Is there a way we can put our attention on, it's a good thing that he passed when the time comes? Because I don't want to fall apart again. It's too rough for me.
What I choose to put my attention on is his integrity, his beauty, my positive memories of him. Not about what's happening next and all that.
Yes.
We have a lot of unknowns about that. I mean, we believe certain things. We want to believe certain things, and I believe they're. I believe to whatever extent I can that what I believe is true. But
Yeah, not about where they go after they die, the cats, all animals. Not about that, but can grieving be better or not grieve at all? It is. I'm not trying to be selfish, because you see what I mean? Isn't that funny that I'm saying it that way? Because it feels like it's very selfish to grieve because you're grieving because you don't have that animal in your life anymore. Because we're talking about the cats now. We don't have that animal anymore. And your grief is the loss. And it's about more about you. It's not about the cat, it's about you. But then I just said, can I be less selfish and not, would it be selfish not to grieve because I don't want to suffer that much and it might not be necessary?
it may be just splitting hairs in definition of terms.
Because is it necessary to go through all that crying?
To me, what I've adopted is what I look to adopt is a subtle difference in the definition of terms and how I deal with such things. Mourning is natural. Grieving, to me, is sort of the prolonged embracing of the mourning.
Oh.
And some of the grieving is also natural, but when you are living a life of grief, then you even for a while, you're basically, in a way, feeling attached to the morning. And to me, you're not, again, it's a subtle distinction, and I may be splitting hairs, but mourning to me is more of an emotional phenomena that you experience with loss. Grieving is one in which you are saying, I am now in that state. You hear about a state of mourning and also a state of grief, so the terms are in some ways interchangeable, but to me, you go through a period of mourning. But if you adopt a state of grief, it's basically saying, I'm only functional if I'm mourning. And we know that that's not.
Yeah, but can we do less? You think it's natural? You do have to feel all that
Yeah, I mean,
that dread of death. I'm trying to avoid feeling that. It's so strong for me. It is just so bad. Every
it's because
time it's
life is
worse.
precious. Life is precious. We all cling to life. He's clinging to life.
Yeah.
Even though he may be sticking around longer than he probably needs to. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. We're talking about a intersection of a metaphysical consideration and a scientific or medical one. We don't know whether or not he is basically in his final days or hours. We don't literally know that. From a medical point of view, from a subtler or maybe more metaphysical point of view, we sense that that's the case. And then that's very much triggered by how he is physically, of course, and even mentally. But we know definitively that he is hours away from leaving? No, we can't know that. Where medicine could know that better. It's a little bit of a TV and a Hollywood thing, but it is accurate that very often a doctor can examine a patient, whether it's an animal or a person, and know that, with a high degree of confidence, that they have a certain number of hours or days. We don't know this about him. We sense it.
Can we grieve less? Can we suffer less? Can we cry less? Can we embrace a feeling and a belief that this is all normal, natural, it's the way it should be, and therefore I don't need to be here pulling my hair out?
Less, yes, but definitively not until we're in that state where we know through perception and cognition that the role of death, not the hypothetical or theoretical role of death in the whole scheme of things, and how it all works, and how it is part of the plan.
Yeah, we don't know 100%, and
No.
we're not
And
closer to getting enlightened.
And until we know, I mean really know, getting away from the connotation of knowing through information. And back
Yeah, but don't
into-
we have enough to knowledge to know that it is useless, all this suffering, when someone dies?
To whatever extent,
Or do you think it is more of an instinct and we can't control it?
instincts are part and parcel of being of the more animalistic part of existence. Animals, including our animal nature, to whatever extent we have that, are very much influenced, if not driven, by instinct. That's connected to me with the understanding that when we're fully enlightened, when we're no longer in this state of relative ignorance, then we're closer to the animal kingdom than we are to the true human nature. And so when we have developed more of the true status of what it is to be a human, then what you just said is more applicable. We won't instinctively as much grieve and mourn and doubt, because we have that experience of the interconnectedness and infinite nature of all things, all beings.
Yeah, but like we were talking in the beginning, we know already that the suffering, it's because we feel the loss. It's how we feel. It's about us more than about them. So
Right.
Can't we change that filter? Can't we see it into different eyes and to try to feel less?
There's that Vedic expression that knowledge is structured in consciousness. So yeah, you can change that filter to the extent that your consciousness supports that. The greater your consciousness, the greater your ability to, you use the creative, interesting term, change that filter.
Wouldn't that be damaging physically to grieve less, or not to grieve, or to try not to go there?
If it's adopting a mood that isn't our actual experience, yeah, it's damaging.
Yeah, but no, but think about it. We meditate, and we know that we have a capability of putting our attention where we choose to. I have noticed that I can do
Yeah.
that,
Right.
and not having to go through all, that problem, because I chose not to. I chose not to suffer right now.
Yeah.
You have that option to choose not to.
It's that old example of when you want to experience the beauty of the rose, you have a choice when you go to pick up the rose, whether or not you're going to wrap your fingers around the stem or around the thorns. It is a choice. But are we still, is it still the case that we experience the hardness of the stem and maybe some of the thorn? Yeah, to whatever extent we're not able to choose the beauty of the flower as opposed to the hardness of the rest of it. It's a matter of where our attention naturally goes and where our attention where we choose to put it.
I don't want to sound like I want to be. It sounds bad when I say that. Oh, I don't want to grieve. I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to go through that again ever. I don't want to feel all that sadness, all that loss. Then leave him alone.
Okay, this one.
I don't want to feel dragged down by death again. And every time is worse than the time before, because it feels like we bring the weight of all those that died.
Yeah, yeah.
So what does that mean? That means we have an unresolved grief then? Jack, let him drink water.
Quite possibly.
Jack.
Quite possibly, but realize it's not a linear, well, I'm not there yet, that far down the road. We have pockets of things that we need to, and that we are addressing constantly in our evolutionary progress. There's it's more accurate to say it's multidimensional or multifaceted or holographic. It's not that, oh, I must not be very evolved because I'm still feeling the grief of every loss, every time another loss happens. that's just that part. It's a very challenging and difficult part of our growth cycle.
Yeah, when you're enlightened, you do feel the loss, but you don't. It doesn't change your happiness inside.
Right, and the classic, well, a classic example of this is from a story that's told in some of the Vedic texts about an enlightened master walking with his followers down a path, down a road, somewhere in India, and one of the followers, possibly to test the degree of enlightenment of the master, when the follower sees a dead cat in the middle of the road, or a dead animal of some sort in the middle of the road, says, "Look, master," or actually, yeah, he says, "Look, master, look at that," and the other followers are trying to discourage the master from looking at it, because they don't want to have the master exposed to something unpleasant in the appearance or in the fact that it's no longer alive. And the master's response is, "Yes, look at the pearly white teeth. Like the beauty, there's still beauty there." It's like,
Caleb wanted to go on the bed. Caleb, that door doesn't open, baby.
No.
There's nothing in there.
And although I admire David Lynch's work greatly outside of the filmmaking world, I admire some of his work in the filmmaking world, but he's done so much to bring meditation and TM to people who are in need. One of the things that I've noticed about him as a director, his fascination with what is often considered dark and absurd and even grotesque, is that he sees beauty, like in the pearly white teeth example. He may see something and he'll portray something that is, in some respects, people would consider grotesque and despicable, and he'll be able to convey some beautiful thing about the color of the blood or something like that. To me, he naturally, well, he's admitted he has this kind of fascination, and it's unusual and not all that appealing to me, but I see the parallel.
To me neither. I think he's a weirdo. Don't like his stuff.
But yeah, nonetheless.
Yeah, but can we put that into practice? Can we, this time when Caleb passes, not fall apart? I don't want to fall apart. I'm in a very difficult time in my life fighting cancer. I don't want to go there.
Yeah, of course, everything.
Am I being selfish by not wanting to grieve? Maybe, but then grieving isn't that the most selfish thing ever, because you're just upset because you don't have that being anymore in your life.
Well, again, back to my personal distinction in the terminology, it's not that I think that mourning is okay and grieving isn't. I think that grieving is in the direction of a more prolonged state, and that doing that is, in my observation and experience with myself, is not healthy. But as we've discussed in other things, context is everything.
Is it unhealthy not to mourn?
No, I'm saying it's healthy to mourn.
But I go too deep. I get too upset. I cry too much. It hurts. I feel it physically.
Well, as I was just saying, that context is everything. For me, since COVID, mourning and grieving and death is much more part of the context. And then with your diagnosis in January, even more so. So to me, things are more, for me, and I think for us, things are more fragile.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it's okay.
Can we do better? Do I have to fall apart? I don't want to fall apart.
Yeah, I don't, well, the falling apart's okay as long as it's the coming back together and we support each other in all that, and we support ourselves and all that. You know, what I have both experienced and observed is that if you want to call it one of the bigger lessons in life is how well timed and how thorough we can be in pulling ourselves back together, putting ourselves back together when we fall. Look, there's nothing inherently wrong with fragility. We put fragile stickers on fragile things we mail so that greater care is made. We need to adopt that philosophy and that strategy with ourselves more. That when we acknowledge that there's something more fragile going on in us and around us and in others, we treat ourselves and we treat our environment and we treat each other with greater care.
I still like to do less of the crying, less of the feeling. Not that I don't want to feel, it's not that, but what purpose does it serve to mourn? What is the purpose?
To me, it's very possible and likely to overanalyze this. There are remedial things that we can think about. How do we want to celebrate, in this case, his life? We don't need to wait. I try to keep my attention on what is about him that is to be honored. And I was thinking this morning that when he goes, we should do something that we both are comfortable, that is in a celebratory way. It doesn't have to be a party. Some people would do that. You know, they have when people or pets they lose that are close to them, they have a party. You know.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, not to celebrate their leaving, but to celebrate everything prior to that. I think it's extremely healing for the people participating and for the individual that has left. So maybe we go out and we have a piece of cake and something, lavender lemonade.
I feel that I'm already mourning and he's not even dead yet.
Well, of course, because he's on his way.
Oh. We were talking about death on my group of the cancer group, a support group, and I said that I think everybody fears death. People say they don't, they're bullshitting. I think everybody fears death. And then the psychiatrist said that, or was the social worker, I don't know, one of them said that not everybody feels that way, you know, there's nothing that everybody feels that way. And then I said, well, I didn't feel that way before I was diagnosed with cancer. I didn't even think about death. But then when you're giving an expiration time,
Right.
things change. There's this dread that comes. I learned this word, and it's so true years ago. There's this dread that comes with death that is so inside us, so deep, deep inside us. It is a dread. It's worse than fear. It's a dread that is so natural. It's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. It is a horrible feeling. And I'm thinking, that's why I'm saying this time, can we avoid the dread? Can we avoid this fear? Because to me, it's very big. And I don't know, because I had many experiences of losing, so have you. But it brings something that is so horrible. Or it's just me. It can't be just me, because I heard other people talk about dread. And it's the dread I feel before they die, when I had premonition dreams and things, and who was gonna die, this time, who was gonna get hurt this time, who, depending on what kind of dream I have. And then I feel that dread. I am very familiar with the feeling of dread before someone or an animal die, because I feel it. I feel it before it happens. And I think I'm dealing with it again now, because I know he's gonna pass. He's in his last days. So I'm trying to rationalize it to the point of, can I not feel this freaking dread? I hate it. I hate this. I hate this knowing that death is coming, and it's horrifying to me. And it doesn't matter how many times I go through this, how many animals I lose, how many people I lose. Every time is worse than the time before. It feels like it. So that's why I'm saying, is there a way? Can we just think that it was good that they were here? Let's focus on the goodness, on the good parts, on the happy times. Can we do that and not the other part? Because it's horrific to me. It's very deep. And I know other people feel that too. Maybe not depending on the degree they feel it. It depends on how close to you it is. I grew up with animals. I grew up with dogs. They didn't come in the house. They were guard dogs. And, they die. And then we have other dogs. I don't remember grieving. I don't remember grieving those animals. I look back and I'm thinking, why didn't I grieve those animals like I grieve now? Because they were out of sight. They didn't come as close to me as the ones I have in the house now, sleeping with me. They were kept up over there. They don't come in the house. They're just to guard the house. I didn't see them sick. I didn't see them die. So it didn't touch me as deeply.
And what else was going on in your life at the time?
Well, I'm growing up. I don't know what else is going on. I'm not seeing it. They're at a distance. That's the thing. They're at a distance.
That's a big part of it,
and
as well as the amount of innocence and joy we naturally have more of when we are younger.
But I think that because a lot of people are like that, even when the animal's in the house, you see a lot of people talking about cats. Cats don't care. Cats don't this. My goodness, we know how much they care. Each one has a name, several names sometimes. They come when you call their name. You don't even need to call their name. We have at ESP. Cats are extremely psychic. You think of them, they come. The contact. It's amazing.
Unless
it's an
they
amazing.
Don't want to.
Unless they don't want to, but they come. And people don't have that affinity, or they treat them as they're just part of the house, another piece of furniture. You treat them like a little being that's there. Talk to them every time you see them. Don't mistreat them. Treat them like little children in your house, like we do. They respect them, love and respect them, and give them what they need. A good nutrition and water and clean places to sleep and all that. My God, they respond immensely. They respond all the time. So I don't know what is the problem with people talking bad about cats. It is not true. It is not true. But so when you're doing all that and you're so close to them, it's the closeness, it's the love that makes you feel deeper. But there's still people that are adults now that don't feel that way because they didn't make that connection. I suppose. It's like having a plant in the house that you don't care much for. You sometimes you forget to water it. I don't. That's not me. I have to try not to overwater it because that's my problem. Uh, life is precious, like I said, and I know because every time I had the surgery, every time I had difficult times in my life, I know how much I want to stay alive. I know how precious life is.
And that goes not just in our, that comes from, not just from our experience this time and in previous lives, but it actually is deep in our DNA. The cells.
It
The
is.
cells
It is.
are always driven toward more and more life.
It is. It is so deep. That's where the dread comes from. That's what I was trying to explain to the cancer support group, that death brings dread. Everybody's afraid. It is. They are. People that say they're not afraid is because they're not thinking about it. They're not thinking they could die that same year, or in a few months, or in a few days. But if you're giving, you know, like the look we have now in life, it's different than most people because me fighting cancer, we know.
Context, right.
We know that I'm not going to be 90 years old. Not 80. Probably not even 70 or 60. So,
So all this is always in the category of a lot easier said than done. But again, it boils down to a few things. Knowledge is structured in consciousness and the ability to, well, there's a connection here. Knowledge leads to action. Knowledge is the basis of action. Action has to do with choice as well. It's connected to what we're choosing to act on, or in what ways to act. So as consciousness grows, our connection to all of that ability and choice in action grows.
I just wish I could just choose. Just say, I'm not going to suffer with death anymore. You know, it's okay. It's part of life. It's part of life. You die and you go on. You don't really disappear like my grandmother used to think. You die, it's done. It's done.
So now you see you're shifting back and forth between considering what may be happening afterwards to how we're dealing with the today.
Yeah, but maybe if we knew for certain what happens afterwards. It has been the quest of my life. Since my father died when I was 16, this is the quest of my life. I am into spirituality, and I forget about it because I've been through so many ramifications of it and learning from so many different sources all these years. But my main purpose was to find out what happens after death. Because I wanted to know where did he go? Where did he go? What happens? That was my main pursuit in life. And I focused my life on this point. If he hadn't died when I was that young, who knows what would have happened to my life? It would be probably a completely different life than it is now. But it is my focus. Has always been what happens. Maybe if I knew, I think that I want to know because if I knew for certain, I wouldn't freaking grieve. I hate grieving. I hate this. I hate it. I hate it. It touches me too deeply.
And here's your dilemma.
Yeah.
Because the certainty of knowing only comes from the experience of, of that in its completion,
Yeah, I only know when I die, but then that's
No,
not the point.
I'm not saying that. Of course there's that. But the certainty of knowing anything virtually anything, comes from knowing that in its completion. And the only way to know something in its completion is for us to be complete.
Yeah, I know all that, but we need to, can we do something with just a little bit of completeness we have right now? To the half of the completeness we have right now. Can we do less? Can we not suffer this?
Yeah,
Why do we have to freaking suffer this
we have
much?
choices of how and when and to what extent we put our attention. But that doesn't mean that we know it completely.
We don't know nothing.
we can increase our comfort with what we know and what we experience by how we deal with these things. But it's all, I can say all these things, but when it comes to the moment that I experience the loss, then regardless of how much I choose not to be in that experience of loss, it can still well up and be overwhelming.
You think it is unhealthy to try not to mourn, not to cry, not to? Is it unhealthy?
No.
Is it keeping it inside, as they say? Because this is not like I'm mad at someone and I keep in the anger inside. That's not it.
I'm not
It's
saying
just
that.
trying not to go that deep. Can we not go that deep? Is it unhealthy?
It's fine to go that, in my mind and in my heart, it's fine to go that deep. It's not a question of how deep one feels. It's how it is more of an issue of if that experience of the depths of whatever that feeling is painful and doesn't allow us to function well, then what's unhealthy is choosing to stay in that. It's not unhealthy to have that experience. It's unhealthy to stay in it longer than is functional. Now, the definition of functional is not going to be an absolute one in this case, because all these experiences allow us to actually start dealing with other things about ourselves and about other people and about our environment and everything else. And there's all sorts of things that can happen that can complicate this. We can at times notice that when we are remaining in that state of deep state of grieving, remaining in it can actually cause us to attract more attention from others, and we may crave that, and we may need it, but at a certain point we should need it less in order to be more functional. It's healing and it's a balm and it's supportive. It takes a village that we have the support of those around us. But we can also get into a complex situation that we are actually feeding off of that instead of being healed by it. It's more of I'm getting attention now. This is not what I'm saying that you experience. I'm just talking about from my experience and also in observing human nature. that it can get dysfunctional because we can get dependent on others to the point that it actually starts hurting them. And then we're not growing in our own self-sufficiency either. Self-sufficiency doesn't mean isolation, it doesn't mean solitariness. It means essentially having within us what we need to be functioning and progressing. That includes the wise accessing of resources in our environment, which also means friends, family, neighbors, whatever, support systems that are there. But they're support systems. They're not our system. They're not, it's a strange example, but there are times where some people need an inhaler because of asthma. But they're not using the inhaler every 5 minutes. That's not functional. I mean, there are those that are in a worse situation that need to have oxygen with them all the time, but that's a different example. If we need support from an outside source, in this case from a medicine, then we have it. But it's so that we can be more functional and then not need it so much. So, getting back to your point of can we choose not to grieve so much? Yeah, we can, but it's also not an absolute. It's like the suggestion of can we choose not to grieve so much implies can we choose not to grieve at all? That would be a strain and therefore unhealthy and actually unnatural. But can we choose to put our attention on things that are more positive about that loss, about that individual, whatever? Yeah, and can we choose to put our attention on other things that inherently have a joyous, joyful, nourishing value to us? Yeah, of course. We should. Those are the choices. But to try to shift to understand the huge big picture of it all, and then we experience the dilemma of, well, we can't experience, I'm not finding it possible to know it all, therefore I must have to grieve because it's so perplexing. It's great to pursue knowledge, and it's important to pursue knowledge, but it has its limits. We can't know it all until we are all. And if we acknowledge that, then we have greater ability to choose that which brings us more comfort and joy.